Hey guys, today we're looking at going with an entry-level Pentium 4 rather than a high-end Pentium 3 for Windows 98 retro gaming. We will also check out a little bit of MS-DOS. Recently we did a video looking at the top Pentium 3 processors available. We had the Pentium 3 running at 1 GHz and of course the ultimate Pentium 3 experience, the Pentium 3 running at 1.4 GHz with the Duality core. Now we found that the Duality has incredible performance, but it costs a lot more and you also got to have a compatible motherboard and CPU cooler. So rather than building a high-end Pentium 3, why not consider an entry-level Pentium 4? Love or hate them, there's no denying that Pentium 4 parts are cheap and easy to find. And I freely admit it, I'm a huge Pentium 4 fanboy. I had a 2.6 GHz machine with a Radeon 9800 back in the day, and it was a great period playing games like Call of Duty, Medal of Honor and Far Cry. The Pentium 4 is also compatible with Windows 98, officially so. The Intel chipsets are very stable and reliable, and we get nice upgrades like USB 2.0, SATA ports, and we can use modern power supplies without having to worry about weak 5-volt rails. Now just to make sure, this video isn't about a historic Pentium 3 versus Pentium 4 period correct comparison. We all know that the first Pentium 4 systems really struggled competing with the Pentium 3. So this video is about value, getting parts for cheap that just work like it should, and having a blast playing Windows 98 and also MS-DOS games. In the pickups video for August 2017, we had a look at this Jetway Pentium 4 motherboard. While it had a few capacitors that are in bad shape, it came with the box, manual, driver CD, but most important, it has the Intel 865 chipset. Now there are a lot of chipsets available for the Pentium 4, and usually I don't like telling you what to get, but if you're building a Pentium 4 system, forget about VIA, forget about SIS, just get the Intel 865 chipset, it really is that good. So coming back to the capacitors and the board, firstly it was quite dirty, so using my arsenal of little brushes and other cleaning tools, I gave it a good clean. Some of the capacitors are busted, but I always fire up a motherboard to make sure it's working. I won't even consider putting in the time and money to replace capacitors if a board doesn't work, as there could be all sorts of other things that don't work. It has a removable BIOS chip, so of course I had to flash the latest BIOS. The Jetway website doesn't really exist anymore, but online I found version A08, and that's what I flashed onto the motherboard. I loaded the optimized BIOS defaults and do the usual BIOS tweaks like disabling integrated devices that I'm not using and also configuring the SATA controller so that it works with Windows 98. We will be using 3 Pentium 4 processors. All of them have the Northwood core. The slowest one runs at 1.6 GHz with 400 MHz FSB. The next model up is a 2 GHz model, also with 400 MHz FSB. And the fastest processor runs at 2.4 GHz. This one has the higher 533 MHz FSB, and all 3 have 512 kilobytes of level 2 cache. We're using 2 sticks of 256 MB of DDR memory, nothing special or low latency, just some generic RAM sticks. The video card is the same GeForce FX 5900 XT that we used for the Pentium 3 test, so we can compare the results. And we're also using the same sound card, the Yamaha Waveforce 192XG. This is a really interesting PCI sound card with fairly decent MS-DOS support, and we will be looking at this later in the video. For storage, we're going with an 80 GB SATA drive, and for the very first time, we are not using an optical drive. On our Retro PC Gaming Facebook group, a member used this easy-to-boot project to install Windows 98 on a HP thin client PC, so I just had to try it. And it worked great, although very slow because the BIOS only supports USB 1 speed. But that's another benefit of going with the Pentium 4. They usually have no issues booting from a USB device. After partitioning and formatting the hard drive, I proceeded with installing Windows 98. Now, then we're installing the Intel chipset drivers, and they pick up all sorts of devices after a reboot. Next up come the graphics drivers for the NVIDIA video card and also the sound card drivers for the Yamaha PCI sound card. We're also installing DirectX 8 so that we can run 3D Mark 2001 SE, and the MS-DOS mode, super easy project that sorts out the MS-DOS with an easy to use boot menu. And then I shut down the machine, remove the hard drive, connect it to my desktop, and I copy across all the benchmarks and also a few games. So let's have a look at some benchmark results. We got 3D Mark 99 Max. We have the two Pentium 3s here, the regular 1 GHz and the Duality 1.4, and here we have our Pentium 4 processors. So in this benchmark, the Pentium 4s do pretty well compared to the Pentium 3s. In 3D Mark 2000, we can see the same picture with the 2 GHz and the 2.4 GHz Pentium 4 leading the charts. In 3D Mark 2001 SE, we can see something interesting. In certain benchmarks and games, the Pentium 4 processors don't do well, or put another way, the Pentium 3 processors do extremely well, and this is one of them. But look, this is just a synthetic benchmark, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. And in Expandable, so this is a game that runs well on the Pentium 4s. Even the 1.6 Pentium 4 is able to be on the same level as the Duality. In Dragon, the performance improves, so the Pentium 1.6 is now ahead of the Duality. And Quake 2, now this is an OpenGL game, and looking at a few other results on the internet, it seems that the Pentium 4 struggles with OpenGL, or doesn't get the same performance as a Pentium 3. Now, I still have to do a bit more testing. Maybe this has to do with the NVIDIA driver. Maybe using a Radeon or Voodoo card changes that, but regardless, the performance is plenty for Quake 2. And with the software render, we can see the difference. So here we can see with OpenGL that the Duality is way ahead, whereas in the software render, it is not as fast, still very powerful, but behind the 2.4 GHz. And MDK2, also an OpenGL game, but here basically all the machines do really well. We're getting well above 60 FPS in this benchmark. And here we have some power draw results. Now, unfortunately, I did mess up and I used a different power supply for the Pentium 4, a brand new power supply from Deepcool, fully modular. I might show that in the monthly pickup video. But still, what can we see? We can see that the Pentium 4 doesn't consume that much more power. And because the Pentium 4 has the 12 volt auxiliary connector and uses most of the current from the 12 volt rail, you can use a modern power supply without any issues. So here's my take on the performance of this Pentium 4 build. Against the Pentium 3 running at 1 GHz, it's a landslide victory. The exception is 3D Mark 2001 and Quake 2. For some reason, the Pentium 4s don't do well in those tests. Now, the 1.4 GHz Pentium 3S with the Duality core, that's a totally different story. It is much stronger and in some benchmarks outperforms even the 2 GHz Pentium 4. So that's a really amazing result. But at this point, we have to check ourselves. What is this machine actually for, and how much performance do we actually need to run Windows 98 games? The lowest result for the Pentium 4 1.6 GHz is 80 frames per second in Dragon, so that's extremely playable. And if you need more speed, well, just drop in a faster Pentium 4. They are literally cheap as chips. So we covered Windows 98, let's have a look at MS-DOS. Here we have some benchmark results. This is the 1.6 GHz Pentium 4 with fast vid enabled. At 320 by 200, the performance is well and truly beyond what we need. And here we have results at 640 by 480, and even here we're getting extremely high frame rates. So if you're looking at playing high resolution DOS games, then the Pentium 4 platform is well worth checking out. But what about slowing our machine down? Let's see what we can do. Firstly, I tried the usual set mul utility, but it didn't seem to work with this machine. Luckily, the BIOS has an option for the processor cache, so let's turn it off and see what sort of performance we're getting. Seeing 3D Bench running at this slow speed, I knew right away that this is looking very good. So here we have some benchmark results with the cache turned off, and those results, they're really good. Slow is good in this case. So for comparison, a fast 386 DX40 gets around 15 FPS in 3D Bench. So it's not quite slow enough for Wing Commander, but still extremely useful for a range of speed-sensitive DOS games, especially those point-and-click adventures from Sierra or LucasArts. So of course I did try the ultimate slowdown DOS test, which is Wing Commander, and here you can see me trying to play with the mouse, but it was just too fast, to properly aim and shoot at the enemies. So I switched over to the joystick. So yes, we've confirmed that the joystick, the analog joystick, also works with this PCI sound card, and I had some more success, but ultimately the game just runs too fast. I did muck around with the Yamaha drivers for a while, but in the end, I have to say we only got AdLib and OPL3 compatibility under DOS. But that's not too bad. And we do have an authentic Yamaha OPL3 chip, and with the 486 performance with the caches turned off, this means a ton of classic games will sound really beautiful. But we didn't have much luck getting the Sound Blaster sound to work. So I tried some modified drivers, which are meant to work with the 865 chipset, but not having much luck. Well, I tried a few games from within Windows 98. So you just boot into Windows, open a DOS prompt and run your game from there. And here we had much more success. I tried Doom, Prince of Persia, Wolfenstein 3D and Epic Pinball, and they all worked just fine with proper Sound Blaster compatibility. So the bottom line is that while not every game is gonna work with sound effects, a huge range of DOS games will work just fine, either in MS-DOS mode or from within Windows. So this is one of those cases where you should be focusing on the ton of games that work just fine, rather than stress or obsess over a small range of games that don't work. So I think it's time to wrap up this video. This is a project for anyone that gets frustrated or put off by the ever-increasing prices of retro PC parts. At the moment, the Pentium 4 is still cheap and easy to find, but mark my words, this is what people said about the 486 or Socket 7 gear many years ago. So if you see a decent Pentium 4 system or a CPU motherboard bundle, go for it. They are great alternatives to the Pentium 3. They've got decent performance in Windows 98 and DOS. The chipset is rock solid with USB 2.0, SATA for easy interfacing with the modern world, and we can use modern power supplies without any issues. As for the Jetway motherboard, it's a keeper. I had absolutely no issues or crashes. So this board will definitely get some TLC, and I will order a few capacitors and also swap out the chipset cooler while we're at it. We will definitely be seeing this board in future videos. For the video card, we are very flexible. It doesn't have to be the 5900 XT. Any GeForce 4 or FX card should do the trick. And if you prefer to go with ATI, something from the 8000 or 9000 series. For sound, there are also quite a few options, and I'm only starting to really look into PCI sound cards with DOS support. But a card with the Yamaha YMF chipset is a good choice. It's got support for EAX and A3D, as well as pretty good, but not perfect DOS support. So guys, there you have it. I think an entry-level Pentium 4 is a great alternative to a high-end Pentium 3, and also a lot cheaper. Now, being a Pentium 4 fanboy, of course I think this is an awesome project, but I hope I backed it up with enough evidence to show you why, and I'm very interested in hearing your opinion. What system would you go for and why? If you found this video interesting and want to see more content like this, please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Click on the notification bell, like or dislike, and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you soon with another one.